Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming back yet again on another Saturday. We appreciate everyone that keeps showing up for these. And we know that a lot of the views come after we do the live portion, but we still appreciate the ones that are here. Like always, leave your comments, questions, suggestions in the Facebook app or on YouTube. And wherever you're watching or streaming, we appreciate it. Jesse, it's good to see you. I'm super excited about today's episode. I know we always say this, but it really is genuine excitement. And we always end the show and immediately Jesse and I will talk to each other and say, okay, like what's next? Who are we going to get next? Who can we reach next? And so I'm very excited that we have this panel between Denise and Doug and Brandon. And we'll get into why I'm excited about that. We've known Denise now for a little bit. Jesse, I'll let you do her short intro. Real quick, I'll let you guys talk about anything else you want to talk about. But I'll tell you, for those of you that don't know Doug Green, this guy is an incredible individual. He's such a good human being. He's not just a husband and a father and a mentor and a friend. I really believe this guy is a walking, talking poster child for all things good. And I really believe that. He's just one of those people that anytime you're in a radius of his existence, you just feel better about everything. So, and he had, Doug, 11 years in law enforcement?
10 years.
I believe. 10 years. All right. I didn't mean to upgrade you. 10 years. 10 years in law enforcement. And before that, he has a history of working in some broadcast. And then Brandon, who's got his Instagram on here of PRs and Donuts, another phenomenal. So we met Brandon last year when we were training in Iowa. We were training a group of officers out in Iowa, and we met Brandon. This guy, same thing, like just happy, just lights up, really was open to the training, open what we were offering, offered a lot during that training. We had a pretty phenomenal experience with him. And just super excited to even know this guy and just the way he thinks and how positive he is. And he's a bodybuilder as well, Army veteran, works for a police department, Oskaloosa PD out in Iowa. So Jesse, why don't you tell us about Denise quick? Jesse's got technical issues. Yeah, I can't hear your audio, bud. I'm going to jump in. So I met Denise, I don't know, maybe three-ish years ago when she was working for CNA. And I went out there to sit on a panel, and I met her there, and then we kind of sort of kept in touch professionally. And then she since left there and is now the director of oversight up in Fort Worth, and very faint. Sorry, I'm trying to get Jesse in here. But while he's doing that, Denise, please tell us a little bit about what you do now.
Yep. So deputy director with the city of Fort Worth, they just created a Office of Police Oversight Monitor, brand new office. It's only been started up for about 3 months now, and we are providing oversight, civilian oversight over the Fort Worth Police Department.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, am I coming out all right now? Okay, so in 2015, it was interesting because we got visited by CNA. It was her and her partner. And she came out, and we found out that she was actually tasked, she was contracted by the actual, White House, the Department of Justice, to go out and kind of find organizations that were doing things right and organizations that needed help. So she's seen a lot of things, and I want to make sure I get this right because she has, overseen agencies across the country: Spokane, Washington, Fayetteville, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Las Vegas. And she has worked on police issues, everything from body-worn cameras to violence reduction, officer safety and wellness, critical incident reviews, and like I said, the last administration's 21st Century Policing initiative. So she knows her stuff, and that's pretty much why we wanted her to bring her on. I apologize for I don't know what happened with my mic there, but I'm glad to have all of you guys.
Thank you.
So just want to get right into it, Joe.
Yeah, real quick though. I do, but I really quick want to just make this exciting announcement. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, but we actually are partnering with Milo Range. For those of you that don't know, think of simulator type training, but specific to them, we're going to help write some training. We're working with Dr. Joy Verplank out of there, and they're talking about doing some implicit bias training to help through the use of simulation. And so we're really happy that we have this relationship. Again, it's relatively new. Jesse just co-wrote a blog with them. And so, yeah, I'm really excited that they've brought us in to help out because I think that now more than ever, we've gotten away for so long of talking about things and how things should be or how they could be better. But now more than ever, people are actually being called to the carpet. And so I'm excited about some of the changes that are going to be taking place. And so we're excited about the partnership with Milo Range.
We absolutely are. Absolutely. So just so everyone can get to know you guys a little bit better, I want them to get the sense of not only your expertise and your experiences and, how we got here. I think the most basic question we can ask is, why did you get into this line of work? Why was policing or criminal justice so important for you to get into, and why make this career choice? What made you guys get into this? We'll start with Doug.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, guys, thank you so much for having me on the show, and I'm honored to call you both brothers in blue. The relationship runs deep. You are the two guys that I know that I can call in the middle of the night, no matter what time it is, and you'll be there. And so I just want to thank you so much for your friendship. So we talk about it all the time, but I don't think you really choose this profession. The profession chooses you. And for me, I heard the calling. It came as whispers ever since I was a kid. As far as I can remember, 6 years old, whenever the police car would drive by, I would just stop everything that I was doing to watch that police car go by, to watch the policemen. And I just knew that there was something special about them. And, it could be that I love to watch cartoons, G.I. Joe and all those hero cartoons. But I knew that these guys were heroes. It took a special breed of people to do that. And, as I was growing up, I found out that my great grandmother was the 8th African-American female to join the ranks of LAPD. And so that even spurred me on that, wow, this is in the blood. And come to find out that she worked on the streets. She worked in the juvenile detention center. She did some administrative duty stuff, but she really had a passion for kids, which is the same passion that I share with her. But you know what? I didn't decide to join the ranks of law enforcement until I turned 30 years old, because I believe that you have to have the right heart. You have to ask yourself some serious questions. You have to ask your family some serious questions before you jump into this profession. And you have to answer those questions with confidence. And the main question is, are you willing to put your life on the line for complete strangers? Knowing that you have people waiting for you at home, knowing you have a mother or father, people who really care about you, who are going to be worried about you, but are you still willing to take that risk? And so it wasn't until the age of 30 that I could say with the utmost confidence, I was able to take that risk. And I was living in LA at the time. And so my family in LA said, hey, so you're going to be a police officer. That means you're going to join LAPD, right? And I'm like, I am out of here. Vamonos. I'm going straight to Texas. I'm going to be a Texas Popo. Those were my heroes growing up. And I didn't mention this, but I was born and raised South Texas, and my dad's side of the family was from California. And that's the side of the family that my great grandmother is a part of. But when I decided to pick a city to become a police officer in, when I think of Texas, I think of the Alamo. And also it helps that I'm a big Spurs fan. So San Antonio was the choice for me. And let me tell you, I just love this city to death. It's a great city to be an officer. And then my brothers and sisters, the bond is just so strong. It just feels like a family. So I've been on for 10 years, worked on patrol for 4 years, and then transitioned to media services. Been there for going on over 6 years now.
It's been that long already, Doug. Wow.
Already. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So I met Doug in the academy. He was in my senior class. and he was the class president. So right away when I met him, I was like, man, that dude is just awesome. And then I became president of my class, and I mean, we've been right behind each other in careers, and it's awesome seeing him as the face of the department and all the good things he does. He has a really tough job. I don't think people get that. It's a very tactful job, and you really have to have a pulse of everything that's going around. So you do really good with that, Doug, and I appreciate you doing this with us.
Thank you, bro.
Speaking of South Texas, right? We have a South Texas girl with us, and pretty interesting. Another thing about Denise, right? She's in South Texas, and I'm going to let her get into like why criminal justice was such an important passion for her, like why she wants to do this work. And I say that she made it in public policy, right? She, Arlington, Virginia, gets in with a research kind of almost think tank, I guess is what you could call it, but a very prestigious research organization. And now she's actually at an administration level for an organization, kind of dealing with these issues and handling these things. So I'll let Denise tell us why you got into this gig.
Thank you. And again, thank you for including me on this panel. I really, really appreciate it. So, yep, I'm from South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley. Went to school in La Jolla. And I went to St. Mary's University and then ended up on the East Coast for grad school. I have always been interested in criminal justice and law enforcement, but more so from a research perspective, from trying to kind of understand criminal behavior. And that's how I got into CNA. And I spent about 11 years with them doing a lot of work, as Jesse mentioned, not only police assessments and oversight and after action reviews, but also helping with officer safety and wellness, violence reduction, implementing body-worn cameras. So kind of a wide range of things. And then as Jesse mentioned too, I just recently started with the city of Fort Worth. I'm now working for local government, which is a different beast on its own. It's an entirely different animal than working in the private sector and working for a not-for-profit. But the thing that I've most appreciated while working at CNA, discovered this, being able to implement change and affect change within departments. I know a lot of folks are not as convinced that change can happen, but I've seen change happen. I've seen departments go and communities go from that initial kind of resistance with each other to building strong relationships, to being able to hold themselves more accountable, and then for both the community and police to understand each other a lot better. And that's what continues to keep me interested in this area, in this field, being able to impact change within the department.
Yeah, I love it, Denise. And we're super excited you're here too, because I think you offer that other side of the spectrum, and you can prove, as you already have, that just because you're in this oversight position doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're out to get us or prove that we're doing everything wrong. It's about really improving the methods or the modalities of way things are done. And again, that's something that's really needed right now. And then finally, PRs and donuts. Come on, man, let's hear it.
Hey, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. This is an honor. Obviously, your guys' training that we did around this time, actually last year, was incredible. Learned so much. I rave and talk about it all the time. It actually got me really interested in hostage negotiation training, in which I was able to complete a level 1 of that this year as well. So you guys are really, really doing stuff that I think everyone needs to hear and see. And going into that training, I originally thought that it was just going to be kind of, learn about mental health, learn about, symptoms and things like that and how to combat it. But it was just so much more of that. It was really, really deep into the culture of what we do in law enforcement in general. And I just thought that it's something that every officer needs to be aware of. One of the things that I remember you specifically said, Joe, was when you made the comment about how officers, we are trained to always see a threat. So everybody that we talk to, we're so concerned that they're trying to do something to us. And with us being so concerned about our safety, we're not listening to them. We don't know what they're doing. We don't know what they're actually saying to actually solve the problem. And that thing that you said really, really stood out to me, because it is so true. And I see it every day. About me. So I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri. That's where I grew up. I was a wrestler in high school, got a wrestling scholarship to a small liberal arts college here in Oskaloosa, Iowa, William Penn University. Got my bachelor's in sociology with an emphasis in criminology. So I was always interested in the criminality of things, and also with how it pertains to race. That was a big thing for me. And then obviously got hired by the police department in 2014. So I've been a police officer for about 5.5 years. One of the things that's really interesting about my background is, so I grew up in St. Louis, in an all-black neighborhood, all-black family, obviously. But for me, I was in what they call the desegregation program. It was voluntary transfer student. I think it started maybe the late 90s, where they would take the St. Louis City kids who lived in the predominantly all-black neighborhoods, and they would bus them out to the nicer schools out in St. Louis County, which were mostly white. So I did that from when I was about 6 years old, all the way until I was about 17 when I graduated high school. And then I ended up going to a small town in Iowa, which is predominantly white. So for me, it wasn't really culture shock or anything like that. It was a little normal, I guess you could say, because I know we're going to get into more, but just to give a taste of something, to me, that's just kind of what I expected. I kind of thought that, to make it in the world, you just had to be in the white world, I guess. And that's that's just kind of how I always thought it was. I never really thought anything of it. So, but what got me into law enforcement was just the prestige of law enforcement. I think that what cops do every day, and obviously I'm biased now because I've been doing it for a little bit, but what we do every day is just, we do so many good deeds. So much good comes from law enforcement. And, I always say that I think that law enforcement is the most prestigious job that you can do. And I think that the United States Armed Forces is the most honorable service you can serve in. I always say that, kind of the same thing, I guess, but that's kind of how I like to separate the two. But yeah, no, I'm just really, really grateful to be here today with you guys and you great minds, and to have good conversation and talk about these things.
I love it. So thank you everyone for what you've said and being here already. I'm like, there's so much I want to say. So I'm going to try and narrow it down. I love, it's like we do these things on purpose, but we don't understand the benefits or the value until we're actually in real time. And then it's like, I'm having all these epiphanies. Doug said something, when we were doing the film circuit tour last year with Ernie and Joe Crisis Cops, I realized in talking to different groups and different communities in different states, I think, it's one of the things that we should really strongly look at. And I said this for probably the last 2 years, is I wonder what it would look like if you couldn't even join this profession until you were 30. Like, think of how drastically different it would look because we know as far as the brain goes, it's not even developed in men until 27. But yet at 21, you have the ability and the authority and, the decision-making, supposedly training to not only remove someone's civil liberties, but to also up and to including taking someone's life. And I just think maybe we should hold off. Maybe we should look at what it would look like if we said, hey, the minimum age to become a police officer in this country is 30 years old. And I'm curious of Denise's take on that. And then Brandon starts talking and I'm like, yes, because in my notes before the show, one of the things that I was mentioning, because yes, I do think it's important that we talk specifically about some of the things happening and ways to move forward. But when we talk about our training that we provide, yes, it is CIT training, but it's so much more than just mental health and de-escalation, right? It's just to the point Brandon made. And I promise you, we did not talk before this. I didn't tell him to say that. I love the fact that a year later, that still sticks with him because it's such an important piece of our training is I tell people, you have to learn to see beyond the problem, right? See the person, not the problem. Focus on connection, not correction. And look at when people are acting out, when people are yelling and screaming, they're doing is calling for love and attention, but we don't see it that way, because what we're trained is that they're going to kill you, they're out to hurt you, they want to harm you. And so I think words matter. And even Brandon saying, like, I think it's prestigious being a law enforcement officer. Those words, law enforcement, just rubs people the wrong way, because if we're honest, certain laws are meant to be broken, and certain laws were created just to keep oppressed people further oppressed, right? And you can look back at the history of our systems, and I get frustrated when I hear people say lately that the systems are broken. The systems are broken. I don't think the system. To me, in order for something to break, it first implies that it ever worked. Our system has never worked, because our system has always been unequal. It's been unfair. It's favored one side or the other. And so I think that there's so much work to be done. And I love this crossroads that we're at. Again, it's super, super unfortunate, but I love the fact that we have an opportunity now to make things right. So anyway, I'm just throwing things out that you guys got me excited about. I'm sure Jesse has something to say by now.
I do. So it's funny you mentioned that, right, Doug, because I joined when I'm 30 also, but it wasn't like some decision. The way life lined up and everything kind of fell into place that way. But yeah, and I used to attribute it to maybe the Marine Corps, but right, there's a reason why you and I led our academy class, Doug. Like, we just had a level head about thinking of things, and that's just kind of the way it worked out. And maybe it had to do with that maturity. Now, I don't know if police departments can afford to make that movement, because you would lose so many people. And we all know right now that every single department in America is hurting for people. But there is something to be said about wisdom and about maturity, right? That we could totally go into that. And Brandon, man, what I remember very vividly a moment when you spoke in that group. We were having a discussion, and it kind of broadened, and I think it even went into this realm, right? So we've Joe and I were trying to count recently how many agencies we've trained, and there was a huge list. Because we recently partnered with Milo, and they wanted to see like our influence or whatever. So I was like going through, I was like, man, it's a lot of agencies. And of all the people we've trained, there's a few that stand out. And I got to say, Brandon, you're one of those, man. And you're just a badass. So I really, really appreciate you helping us. But I don't know if Denise wants to add anything to that. But Joe's question was what you thought about maturity and age affecting police behavior before we go on.
I would just say I completely agree with you about, I think you'd lose a lot of folks. And I think also there are younger folks who are mature who, can bring a lot to the profession. So I know some agencies what they're doing is implementing an education requirement. So they have to have a minimum of 2 years or even a full-on bachelor's degree. So it depends. I think it would be very difficult to make it work though.
Excellent, right? And that's a good point. And it's probably, I would say that we do notice that, science tells us that women mature faster than men. And so that would certainly open the doors for that. And I've seen, I was an instructor at the academy for a little while, and I did see women like rise to positions of leadership in the class, and you could see kind of maturity levels. And I also saw something kind of significant, right? I remember that there was a few young people and a few older people, a lot more older people when I got on. And now it's like a lot of young people. And that's something also to consider, back to Joe's point. But, we could talk about everything all day, and I want to bring us back in because I really want to get into this stuff. But probably the most significant question I'm going to ask you today is, and I don't want to talk about like events, specific occurrences of things. This is going to be contextual and broad, right? And I think Joe says, like, what is even happening? Like, what is even happening right now? What is going on? In your opinion, in your words, describe to me what's happening. And again, not an event broken down. I just mean societally, overall, like, what is it that you're seeing? And we'll start with you, Brandon.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I think it's emotion. I think it's emotionally driven. I think that, if you look at the historical context of everything, I mean, we can, the thing is people don't understand what slavery was. I mean, people know what it was, but they don't truly understand the horrific, it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away, knowing that people were, blacks were, chased by law enforcement, when they were runaway slaves. I mean, that is the reality that they lived in, and all the other atrocities that happened during that time. Then we're freed, but no one's still equal, and Jim Crow laws, and in the 60s, and I'm just bringing up stuff now that just off the top of my head, but in the 60s, when the Arkansas State Troopers showered protesters when they were peacefully protesting at that time. So I mean, it's the history of it. It's the history, and the trust is just not there. The trust is not there, and I can speak, as a black man growing up in a black neighborhood with a black family. I can tell you that that's all we knew. That's all was ever brought up. I didn't have too many stories about the police doing great things. I didn't have too many stories about the police, protecting and serving. That wasn't a thing. And then you look at our culture, with hip hop and all these other things that are very, African American directed. I mean, it's in our culture. I mean, I got on Hulu the other day, and you can't find a movie about cops where the cop is not doing something wrong. It's become bigger than anything that I would have ever imagined. And the emotion is just so strong that's why people don't understand. They don't understand the historical context of things. And I think that's why we are where we are, and I can speak as a police officer and speak to other police officers that I've spoken with about this, and they don't understand the historical context. And I think that's where a lot of the issues start is, they're not sensitive to it, or they can't empathize, because to them, they did not enslave us. They did not do these things because, they were born in whatever year they were born, but it wasn't the 1800s. So I think that's how they think. And I understand that. I get that, right? Because you didn't do anything wrong, but it's not about you at this point. It's a way bigger picture. And I think it's all emotionally driven. Some people are insensitive to it. Some people are very sensitive to it. I've seen so much support. I've gotten so many personal messages and phone calls from everybody, white, black, doesn't matter. And they've been calling and concerned about me, knowing that I am a police officer and also I'm a black man. And, everyone always wants my opinion, and it needs to be on Facebook, and it needs to be put out on social media for me to have a stance on something. And this is what I enjoy. This is what I think matters more than putting something out on Facebook or sharing something to get, attention, or, not reading an article, but sharing the article anyway, just because of the headline. I mean, that's kind of what we've created through social media. And I think that's also driving people's emotions, because I think that's what people are saying. A lot of people are watching the news, and if they do watch the news, I mean, then, you can never tell what's real with that either. So I would say the number one word is emotion and pain. Emotion and pain. People are tired of it, and it's so sad that this is what it has become. And another thing that I have to say is that I feel terrible for police officers that are absolutely have no idea about these things, because they just don't understand why they're hated. They don't understand why they're not appreciated. They don't understand these things, so then they get defensive, and then they feel like, well, we have to stand up to ourselves or back the blue and all those other things. And I totally understand that concept. But at the same time, what people are saying is this is not what that's about. And I think that the faster or the sooner that we all start to get on the same page in some way, I think it'll be better. But I think us getting on the same page is going to take a long time, because we always pick a side, and we always have to be so divided all the time. And it's just.
Now, Brandon, you nailed it, right? So that's what everything I want to talk about, you're like bringing up right now. And that was brilliant, bro. And I know we're going to get into a lot more of it in certain details specifically, but I think you summarized that really well. And I really appreciate you speaking out about it, about how you feel, and everything you do for your community is awesome. I also want to say, I think it's really awesome that your agency supports you, right? It was really cool to see your agency kind of proud that you're doing this show. So that's a really cool agency you work for. Denise, what do you think? Like, why is this going on?
I agree that a lot of this is emotionally driven. I think folks are at a point where enough is enough, and we've gotten to a point where we don't really understand each other. I've seen a lot of that is going and working with agencies directly. I think, and how I break it down to folks is, look, at the end of the day, we all are going to sit at the same table and we all really want the same things. We want to improve policing. We want to improve those police community relationships. We want officers to be safe. We want the public to be safe. And I think it is difficult for folks to come to the realization that at the end of the day, we're all in this together. But after we hear each other, their input and their perspectives, it becomes a little bit easier. But, and the other thing too, I wanted to say is I'm hoping that this is really a tipping point for policing, a true tipping point. I know we've said that before and in the past, but I think we've gotten to a point where I think police agencies have reached an understanding that things do have to change, and are beginning to be more accountable about how that change looks.
Thanks, Denise. And I think we may have to pivot to what, because it's going in this direction. But I do want to say, right, the reason why we're doing this, because I've had both people unfollow me on both sides, like in my social media. Like I'll post something and it's in both, like you can be all things at once, right? You can have all these things, but people are so polarized right now. They're like, you know what? He posted a black square on Instagram. I'm done with that dude. He doesn't like cops and he's a cop. That's not what I'm saying, right? And then I'm posting something like, I think it's incredible that an agency will like give up its precinct or its building, or we're talking about disbanding police altogether, or taking away important money that a department needs just to function, as right now we're functioning just as we can. We always need more. We need more training, but they're taking stuff away. So all these things happening at once, I mean, that I may not disagree with. And then maybe the other side thinks like, oh, you don't get it. So it's a very, very difficult thing to be in. And all we want is to bring the conversation back to center, right? How can we stop this and bring people together to have a conversation about these things and try to bring people together? Doug, how about you, bud? What's going on?
There we go. Awesome. Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. The main thing I really feel is that the people are crying out for help. They've been crying out for help for a long time. And they feel like they're not being heard. And they just really want somebody to listen to. And we have these town hall meetings and all these attempts to try to bridge the gap. And I honestly feel that the best way to do that is one-on-one conversations. And so that is something I had the opportunity to take part in last week. A gentleman who from the east side of town, which is the predominantly black side of town in San Antonio, had some viewpoints, wanted to share his heart with me. And so arrangements were made in a safe space for me to just sit there. And I wasn't there to judge. I wasn't there to interrupt his conversation. I wasn't there to defend anybody or anything. I was just there to listen. And he went to town, and I brought my notebook with me, and I wrote down everything, and I showed it with humility and open-mindedness to see what can I do, what can my brothers and sisters do to better serve you, because we all have that within our heart. We just can't help it. We see somebody that needs help, we go towards the danger, we go towards that person, we want to help them. And so he let it all out to me. And let me tell you, probably about 5 minutes after we shook hands and went our separate ways, I gave him my personal phone number, and he sent me a text message, "Hey, Officer Green, whew, that felt good." Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me. That's all I wanted. And so, and I said, "Thank you, brother, for sharing your heart. Let's continue to connect here in the future." And now we got the ball moving, and we need more of that. We need just more officers sitting down one-on-one with people who don't look like them, with people who share different views, and understand one another. And at some point, you're still going to have some disagreements, but at least you're going to part ways understanding one another, and that's progress. And so I'm looking forward to the direction that San Antonio is going in. I think, like you said, this can't be solved overnight. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so in order to do that marathon, have that marathon mentality, And what we talk about this, right? Smooth is fast, right? Take your time, meet with people over lunch, over coffee, and hear their heart. And that's what's going to move us closer. So that's the thing. People were just saying, "Hey, you're not taking time. You're not recognizing. You're not seeing me right now." And I love, Joe. You've talked about this. I see you. I see you. Right? You got to hear me, so I can see you first. And so that's where we're at. And I think this is fertile grounds. This is the time. This is the tipping point for us in law enforcement, for everybody to just slow down, and listen.
Yeah, I love it, Doug. I was a colleague of mine shared something with me on LinkedIn, and I watched it. I read an article, and then I watched this. And it was actually a sermon, but the pastor, Miles McPherson out of San Diego at Rock Church, he went on there to talk about sociology and how we as people assimilate, and we have in groups and out groups. And even within our in groups and out groups, we have built-in biases and how those affect us. But I think what's super important is that we understand exactly what Brandon just said, exactly what Doug's saying, exactly what Denise is saying. Like, for me personally, there's two things that are going to help us move the needle. The first is we have to be willing to share our story. And I feel like this is happening now more than ever, but that is not the only thing. Not only do we have to be willing to share our story, our historical context, our experience, our perception of the experience, whatever it is. The second part, which is the most important part, is you have to have someone that is willing to listen. Right? Because for too long, we just have so many people talking at each other, and we're just talking at each other. We're trying to, it's like in marriage. Do you want to be right or do you want to be in love? We just have people like forcing information because I'm trying to win this argument. I'm trying to prove my point. And so immediately I get defensive and you're not hearing me. And so I have to validate this and validate this. And it's like, just stop. If we would just be willing to, just what Doug is saying right now is just stop, humble yourself. It does not matter what your background is versus what their background is versus what you look like versus what they look like, what they have, don't have. Just listen and then validate their experience, because there's nothing ever wrong with validating the emotion or the perception of somebody's experience, because for them, it's very real. It's like Jesse and I have been saying, with everything going on, whether it was the pandemic and COVID, or now with everything that's happening post the killing of George Floyd, every experience everyone is having is valid. Like, whatever you're feeling is valid. Like, who am I to tell you shouldn't feel that way or you should feel this way? If you're mad for good reason. If you're angry, be angry. But the point is like, what are we going to do to move forward from this? Like Brandon said, there's a strong and long history that so few people actually understand. We understand the surface of it, but we don't understand because we, especially as white people, we cannot grasp, we can't comprehend what it's like to be oppressed and cast away for decades and decades and decades, and to have laws built against us. And so we have to be willing to share our story. We have to be willing to listen to other people when they're sharing their experiences.
Excellent, Joe. Really good stuff. Which brings us to this next point, right? I know this conversation is going to be long. We have a lot to talk about. We may not get to it all, but there's some things I do want to get to. Doug, you and I both worked on the 23 site together, right? It wasn't a good neighborhood, right? We did the best we could, and sometimes, addressing crime is tough, and it isn't always easy. And I know that's why a lot of officers out there are like, you don't get it, right? Like, we're saturated in a high crime area. We're trying to deal with crime. What do you expect from us? And to Brennan's point, right, some of us don't understand because we just see our side and we don't know contextual history. We don't know emotions, and because we're not listening. Historically, we all know here that culture is difficult with police departments, right? We don't like change. We're resistant to it. Some have really good culture, some don't. And Denise mentioned that some are able to change, right? It is possible. We are lucky enough to work with an agency that has a good culture, I believe. And I think that's why we don't have the problems that we're having in other cities, right? But even here, people are mad. Like, they're mad here. and it kind of raised to that, but not to the level of other places. And I think that speaks to the work that the officers do, the leadership, culture, all these things coming together. But is it helpful for officers to be resistant to change? Is it helpful for officers to be throwing out facts, to be giving out statistics and numbers to try to make an argument? Or should we be listening, right? Is it helpful for us to be like, you know what, you're wrong, and I'm not going to listen. We know that we're right, and that's it. How does the officer that is not understanding, or the culture that's allowing that, how do we address that? And I'll start with you, Denise, on this one.
I think it goes back to the point that Joe made earlier about perception. So you can have all the data, and I've said this before too with other agencies I work with. So you can have all the data in the world that says that you're not racially profiling in traffic stops. But if your community feels like you are, then there's probably a problem that needs to be addressed. So regardless of the data, regardless of what the facts say, the numbers say, at the end of the day, if the community has a perception about there being an issue, there's an issue that needs to be addressed, and folks need to be listened to. I think the obvious answer is, you can't get anywhere with resistance to culture change. It needs to happen. Folks need to be heard, need to have their voices heard on both sides too.
That's excellent, right? And I think that's what we come across a lot of, is just that the particular thing. And you mentioned something interesting, right? And I'll let Joe talk about it, but perceptions matter. And Joe has data that's showing how this is affecting mental health by demographically, and it lends itself to the research that's already out there, right? So if we talk about vicarious effects, I talked about this in the last episode. So there's lots of research out there that says that perception is actually more effectual than reality in social science. So if I go out and I have a bad experience with somebody, if I yank them out of the car and I use force on them, they feel they're treated unjustly. After that, they go tell their friends or family. The friends or family receiving that information, the effect is higher as if it happened worsely to them. And that kind of variance is different and more effective, if you will, or effectual, I guess, across different racial groups and socioeconomic groups, and it's specifically African Americans. So their perception of things is highly sensitive, right? And I think that's what matters, is if you're an agency out there, or you're a leader out there, or wherever in America, and you're not considering perception, you have a problem. So excellent point, Denise. I don't know, Joe, you want to bring up those stats? Yeah.
So Jen McShane, like 10 minutes before we go live on the show, sends this article from the Washington Post, and originally it was a study done. They were tracking mental health outcomes from COVID, from the pandemic, right? And so we knew that there was been a pretty drastic increase from people being quarantined and out of work and financial stress and everything else going on. But they pin on this graph the killing of George Floyd. And then there's a drastic uptick in the African American and Asian population in mental health, with depression and anxiety specifically, whereas the white population dropped off like 1% or stayed about the same. And while it was only like a 4 or 5% increase, you're still talking about almost 2 million people that have recorded, and this is of the sample that was studied, but have recorded a significant increase in their depression and anxiety. And it's exactly to the point that Jesse's making. We don't have to sit there and wonder, I wonder why there's so much suffering happening right now. If you're asking that question, then the bigger question is like, why am I so lost? Because you don't have to be incredibly intelligent to just wake up, be a part of this world, and know like there's a problem and it's affecting certain people a lot more than it's affecting others. And so again, acknowledging is just part of it. The follow on is like, yes, acknowledge, but then empathize, really try and listen and hear people out. And then how do we move the needle and move forward? So I think, again, the whole point of everything that Jesse and I do falls back on mental health and mental wellness, building resilience. But it's incredibly difficult to build resilience when this is what you're up against, right? And so I appreciate the fact that getting some echo. I appreciate the fact that there's these studies and data that comes out, but to Denise's point, none of this actually matters. What matters is individual experiences, and the individual standing up and sharing their story and talking about the pain they're experiencing. That's what matters. And those are the people that we need to absolutely connect with and reach out to and find and just wrap our arms around and let them know that we see them and they're just as valuable to us as anybody else. But it's important that we use our platforms to do just that.
Oh, excellent, Joe. Again, there's a lot to get to, and I think Denise kind of nailed that question down really well. Normally, we ask a question to let everybody address a topic, but in the interest of time, and I want to say this to Doug. Doug's joining us, and he has something very serious happening in his family, and the fact that he's taken time out to talk with us about this subject just kind of shines the kind of man he is, and we want to let him get back to his family during this time of mourning. I want to talk about this next, right? There's a lot of discussion about the idea of this thing called duty to intervene, right? Where if you're an officer and you're seeing another officer do something wrong, there's an expectation legally and ethically for you to intervene, right? If you see an officer doing something wrong and you know it's wrong, it's criminal, you intervene. But just so people can understand how these things work, right? I think there's something different, right? If I want you to think about, right? There's one thing to say if you're a senior officer, because I was a rookie once, right? And I can think of a few times where I was doing something stupid, where I was putting my life in danger unnecessarily, or I probably could have done something better. And the senior officer will pull me aside and be, hey, young buck, this is what you did wrong. Or a sergeant gets in. I remember I went into a backyard following another officer from a different agency because I had the mentality, right? And it was a bad move because we didn't know what was back there. And I just jumped following him. And afterwards, Sergeant Johnson was like, hey, you don't do that. Here's why. You see that, right? But is there a reasonable expectation? Why would you not have maybe a rookie correcting his FTO? Why would you not have a rookie correcting a senior guy? Why is, even though it's reasonable and fair, why is it a difficult expectation in our culture? Doug, you want to address that first?
Yeah, I think that stepping into this world of law enforcement, there is we're depending a lot on those older guys to show us the ropes. We, it is a family, and we kind of look up to these gentlemen as brothers and sisters, and we put a lot of trust in them. And so you mentioned this made me think of a time when I did a ride along with the FTO, and I can't remember specifically what it was, but the way that he searched the individual, I felt that his tactics were wrong. And so when we got back in the car, he said, "What did you notice anything there?" And I said, "Yeah, your tactics were totally off. You could have got hurt that way." And he's like, "Yeah, I was just doing that so you would notice and pick up on that. So great job, young buck." But yeah, it is easier said than done. I think again, it really boils down to, again, doing the right thing, and I think this situation that we're in is making a lot of officers really think twice, really dig deep into stepping into having hard conversations. I'd had a hard conversation the other day with a young man. I'm trying to have as many sit downs as I can, but he said, "Doug, I consider you a good friend, and this is really hard for me to tell you this, but I know you're a good cop, but I think even good cops are bad. I think all cops are bad, because you good cops, you have an obligation to hold those bad cops accountable, and you're not doing a good enough job about it." And that made me. Then I heard my coach's voice in my head, Coach Aaron Houston, God rest his soul. He passed away just a few weeks ago, and was a father figure and a mentor to me. But he would tell us, he would challenge us. He said, "Good enough isn't good enough. Are you just going to settle for that? However you practice, however you're living your life, however you're being a father, is that good enough? Then that's not what you were called to be. You're missing out on a lot. You're missing out on your potential." And so I'm challenging that a lot of us have just been good enough officers, and our community deserves more.
That's powerful, Doug. That really is. Thanks, man. So yeah, I integrity is a huge part of this gig, right? It's everything to it. And you think that you're going to come out and you're going to be like, I'm always going to do, the right thing to the fullest. And sometimes, I was laughing, right? Because that took a lot of guts for you to say, Doug, like, hey, you could have got yourself killed by doing it that way. It took a lot of guts for you to say that to your FTO. And I can't say that not everyone would have that level of guts to do it, right? So it's important that what you're saying matters, because we need to start thinking about it, and we need to step up and speak up more. And we also, as leaders and senior guys in our organizations, we have to be susceptible to being corrected, right? We have to be, you know what, he's a young cat, like, I'm going to listen to him, right? And if he's wrong, then I'm going to tell him for whatever reason. Joe, you got something? But
yeah, I just want to be mindful of Doug's time. He's going to jump off, so we're going to go a little bit long on this one. I already know it. Doug, we ask everyone, this isn't for Denise or Brandon yet, because we're going to get to you because we have a little bit more. But before you leave us, Doug, we always ask, like, if there's one thing you want to leave with everyone that's going to see this and share it, what is it? And the stage is yours to share whatever you want to share. And again, thank you for your time, brother. Love you.
Thank you so much. Love you guys. It sounds like a simple answer, but it's not. But love is the answer. I've gotten this question many times, and I'm sure you have too, Brandon. What does it feel like to be a Black police officer? Well, first of all, as a human being, what's going on in our world, it hurts me. As a Black person, it hurts me, and as a police officer, it hurts me. When I see an officer tarnish the badge and make us all look bad, that we're out here trying to do it again, it hurts me. But it also hurts me as a Black man when I see other Black men out there shooting and killing folks and committing robberies, and that hurts me as well. And we all need to take a step back. I think we in the Black community, we have a lot of hurt that we're dealing with, and a lot of unresolved trauma. And that trauma is surfacing as hate in a lot of our communities. And to be honest with you, I think we, as the Black community, our demands for justice should be met, but we also need to look at ourselves in the mirror. We need to go somewhere in a big room, close the door, nobody else allowed in unless you're Black, nobody else allowed in, and have some heart-to-heart conversations about what we truly want. And if we're asking for law enforcement to be accountable, we need to also ask ourselves to be accountable as well. And so this is like I said, a fertile time to challenge yourself personally. Again, ask yourself, is your life good enough? Is it just good enough? Or do you want more? And so once we start challenging ourselves and moving forward at a posture of love and humility, we'll get there. Now, I want to be honest that I don't believe that we'll ever overcome racism, ever overcome domestic violence, child abuse, you name it. We just live in a sinful, hateful world. But it's our job to continue to try and to do the best I can. And that's why I became a police officer, to serve in this capacity, to help as many people as I can. And so that's what I got. Thank you guys so much. Again, I'm honored and I'm proud of you, brothers. And my sister, Denise from South Texas.
Thank you, Doug. And prayers and blessings to you and your family. Sorry for your loss. So thank you so much. You're sitting in an RV in the middle of nowhere, Texas, doing our show, man. That's love. And I see you, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. Love you guys.
I love that guy.
Love you, man. All right, Jesse, go ahead.
Doug's such a good dude, man. I'm blessed to know him. Back to the discussion, right? Like, and I want to go to Brendan next on this, right? Why is that culture exist, right? Like, just so people understand the expectation about duty to intervene, or like, if you have a rookie that maybe mentions something, and then a senior officer who's his training officer tells him, "Hey, no, we're doing it this way." I think people can misinterpret that to be that officer is also, rotten or hateful or spiteful, like, especially if you just got on the job. Can you kind of talk through like why that culture exists and how that works, and you know, just give your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's respect. You know, I think that it can be taken as the wrong type of respect, but I think that's what it boils down to. I mean, you guys both being, service members, you understand rank matters. Rank really, really matters. And when you're told to do something, you shut up and you do it. And you want to earn the respect. You want to be in that brotherhood. You want to be in that culture. So you do what you do what you're supposed to do so that you don't get kicked out of that culture. Right. So, and that goes into hazing, that goes into all types of terrible things that people will do just to maintain within that culture. And it's hard for someone new to sit there and say, actually, Sergeant, or actually, Lieutenant, or actually, FTO, or senior officer, you're wrong. That's not the correct way. And obviously tact goes into that. How you do it, how you correct someone is always super important. But I think it boils down to ego, and I think it boils down to leadership. Is the leader, or the person that's in charge, or the person that is supposed to be the most senior person, are they able to accept correction? Are they able to say, okay, you know what? You're right. I am wrong. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Now let's move on. Because even though you corrected me on that one little thing or that one major thing, hopefully I still know more than you to where I can still give you good, proper training. So I think it comes down to that person's ego. And I think ego is just destroying us in a lot of this. I think that's where a lot of our lack of communication comes into play, is based off of ego, because people don't want to listen. They don't want to hear it, right? You have to be able to sit there, sit back, not say anything, allow someone to tell you their feelings because they're valid, just like you said, Joe, and then try to empathize with those feelings. You don't have to necessarily agree with them, but you have to have some type of common ground in order for us to move forward. And in this case, police do. Because at this point, it seems like it's our burden now. We have to make sure that we are putting ourselves in the best positions to have the best line of communication with our communities. That is the most important thing, is getting us back with our communities. And, I think leadership plays a huge role in it, because it starts at the top and attitude reflects it. And, how are the leaders acting? What are the leaders doing? Are they making sure that these things are happening? Is the FTO, the salty guy that's been on for 30 years that, just kind of has created his own way of doing things, and the way he does things is the only way? Guys stay around like that for years, and no one wants to take away their pension or do anything dastardly to them, because they've served their communities. But at the same time, if they're a part of the problem, then maybe that needs to be addressed.
Awesome answer, Brandon. And I love that. But you have that military aspect too, and law enforcement, right? That leadership perspective is what matters the most, and that's going to address changes things. And I have like a two-part question, because I'm going to bring it back to Denise now, but it's kind of all merging into one. In criminology and criminal justice, we have the concept of the blue wall of silence, or the blue curtain of silence, which is one construct, right? And that's the idea that officers protect each other, or like the idea that we'll never turn each other in, or we hide our own bad behavior. We cover for one another. And that construct exists, and I imagine it's variant across different agencies. I'm glad to know that where we work, we probably don't see that much, but in other places there probably is. How could there not be, right? But I found that people are including the idea of the thin blue line in this concept. They're kind of putting it all together. And this is the idea that we cover each other's misconduct or criminality. And one, do you think that's an accurate statement? But moreover, going back to what Brandon said, Denise, how are we going to address this? Like, how do we fix people being able to have the courage to have duty and intervene? I know it's two parts, but I'll let you touch that, Denise.
So on the duty to intervene, I think there's a couple things too. One being, I think it's hard to have those hard conversations just as a human. Just as human nature, it's hard to have hard conversations. It's hard to, especially if you're looking or speaking to someone in authority, it's hard. And then even more so from folks of different cultures, of different ages. And I think the other part to that too in policing is most police training is paramilitary style. So there's a lot of that hierarchy. If I'm more senior to you, you can't speak, out above me or to me in such a way. So that plays into that duty to intervene issue. On the thin blue line, I think for some it represents the us versus them. And it might not be intended that way, but I think that's how it's kind of evolved. For folks in the community, it represents more of an us versus them. I can't really speak to the policing culture in that way, so I completely defer to you guys on comments related to that.
Yeah, so this might shock nobody that knows me, but for a long time, for whatever reason, I've had a bit of an issue with this whole thin blue line concept, because I said, to exactly your point, Denise, on the policing side, I said, I think this sends the wrong message. It's creating this arbitrary false barrier of me being different than or other than you. And so someone's going to steal this, I know it, and make all the money, but that's okay. My idea of what the thin blue line should be going forward is actually more of like a dashed line. And that way there's ways in and there's ways out, because there should be more inclusion. And I think that we should be able to go out beyond that blue line into the community, and the community should be welcomed into our culture as well. And that way it's not a line, it's more of a dashed line. I actually created this and drew it out. I was going to share it on the thing, but it's way too much work. But for me, I think, again, because pictures matter, words matter. There's so many, training cops all over the country. It's funny when we pull into the parking lot and you see the trucks or the vehicles, and they've got 94 stickers and all the blue lines, and then they've got the tattoos. And I mean, it's wow, this really means something to them. But I wonder what it really, really means to them, and if they've put thought into it, or it's just, again, this cultural assimilation of oh, cool, I'm a part of this blue line culture now, and I don't even know what it really means. But anyway, I've struggled with it because of the message it sends on the negative side. Again, even if that's not the intention, I know that can be the optics for some people.
And for everybody that's listening that needs to understand, to validate why they're doing those things, Brendan, what does it represent truly to people in the work?
So the thin blue, I just saw Zach's comment. So the thin blue line is, it's supposed to separate civility and anarchy. That's what it's supposed to represent. And that's why the cops hold the line. That is what that means. But Joe, you are 100%. I said that. One of the great things about my police department is that, we have been having a lot of open conversations about these things. People have been listening, sharing their opinions. No one's getting upset. Everyone's listening. And that's the best part about it. And this is one of the things that I brought up. And you got to imagine that it's pretty difficult in a room full of cops who all have thin blue line memorabilia everywhere to sit there and say that, hey, I think this sends the wrong message at times, because it does become a us versus them type of message. I know that it's not. I know that most of the people that I work with know that it's not, because they're only there to protect, the sheep from the wolf and all that, that whole concept and all of that. But that is not the way it's perceived. You are 100% correct, Denise. You are 1,000. That is not the way it's perceived. I got hired maybe a week or two after Ferguson, and after Ferguson, when that happened, and the scrutiny and all of that, and he was found, and he was not indicted, and all those other things, the thin blue line came out of the wazoo. I didn't even think I knew what it was before that. And to me, I saw that as cops saying oh, well, I told you we did the right thing. This is us saying that we did the right thing. And I thought in my mind, I said to myself, shouldn't we just not do that and just be the police and just keep things if we know we did the right thing, do we need to tell people we did? Let's just move on. Let's just keep doing the job, and do the best that we can. But when you do that, it does send the wrong message. I truly believe that. But I know that thin blue line is the line that we hold between civility and anarchy.
Yeah, I love that. If we did the right thing, do we need to tell everybody? It's brilliant. Quote that, save it, because it's so true. How many people are, again, think of social media, right? It's like, oh, look what I did today. Like, what's the purpose here? Who are you trying to convince that you're a good person? I like, again, a beautiful Stoic quote is stop arguing about what a good man should be and be one. But when we talk again, what I was referring to earlier, from sociologists, and how we talk about our tribes and how we assimilate. And part of the problem, again, for me, is with this blue line or this blue curtain or this whatever, is that people believe, if you don't look like I do, act like I do, think like I do, talk like I do, then you're other. Whatever that is. It doesn't have to be bad, but you're just other. And in our culture, in this world, we spend so much time categorizing people, right? Like, oh, you're a protester, or I'm not a protester, I'm a rioter, and I'm not a rioter, I'm a looter, and I'm not a looter, I'm white, and I'm not white, I'm black, and I'm not skinny, I'm fat, and I'm not this. And it's like we have so many categories to put people in. And we spend so much time creating these like tribes of people. And that in itself is why we have so much divide, because it's like, if you don't look like me, think like me, talk like me, act like me, then you are other than. The problem with that is most people immediately look at that as you are then an adversary. You are then the enemy. You are then the problem because you are different than me, and different creates discomfort. And the way the brain works, it craves familiarity. It craves to be, in this like familiarity or similar place that provides comfort. So spending time, like Denise said, just as an adult, as a human being, having conversations is uncomfortable. Talking to strangers is uncomfortable for so many people. And it's because we don't want to look silly. We don't want to be ashamed. And so much of that is happening right now. It's like people are speaking up, and immediately it's like, you said it wrong. You didn't do it the right way. And so then it's like, see, screw it. And it's like, no, keep trying. If your heart is in the right place, then keep trying. But we have to stop looking at it as me or you and me, and really start focusing on the we. And it rhymes, right? So there's no you and me. There's just we. I'm going to put like a ditty to that. I love it.
You're coming up with all kinds of content today, bro. I have to ask this, right? And this is going to tie into questions. I know we're going long, but I think we're having a great discussion here. I don't want to stop it. And one of our mentors told us, if it's going great, why? Like, who says you have to have a short show? Like, just go. So go on a little bit longer. But I know you guys' time is valuable, so you have to cut short. Let me know. I don't want you guys to waste your weekend on us, right? Granted, everything you've said is 100% accurate, and I agree with it. But the reality is that we have men and women in law enforcement that right now are watching social media. They're having people shouting in their faces. They're having things thrown at them. They're watching particular government leaders just abandon their posts, if you will. We're seeing, a rise in officers being killed or injured across America. We're hearing things like defund, get rid of the police. We're going to vote it out and implement something new. You guys know, you work with them, you know that they're inherently good people and they do a great job every day. How do they keep their morale up? What do we say to them? How do we inspire them to continue this, right? How do we keep them from feeling defeated?
I think that goes back to what you guys preach in terms of mental health and mental wellness. The thing about this job that I've learned is that it's a hard job. It's a hard job, and the trauma that you receive, it gets compounded and compounded and compounded. I mean, I don't know too many jobs that you do every day, like a normal American citizen, that you are taught how to deal with the stress and the anguish that you will encounter in your job. I don't know too many jobs like that. And, with all of this is even worse. I want to say very clearly that, as a Black police officer in an all white department in a mostly white community, I have never been discriminated against or any type of negativity that has anything to do with the color of my skin. I work with amazing people that do amazing work. I've been across the state as an instructor in different things and doing different things. And once again, I am nothing but valued by the law enforcement officers that I've been in contact with. And, the job of law enforcement has provided me basically any and every good thing that I have in my life. So it's very, very challenging times that we face right now because, we already have the stress of domestics and seeing, seeing, um, dead people and just all the terrible things that we see on a everyday basis. And now we have this. Now we have the fact that I have to get on social media and I have to see people, people that I grew up with, people that I went to school with, disown me, you know, per se, because I'm black and also because I'm a police officer. They don't believe in us. They say that we shouldn't carry a gun. They want to defund us. It's funny because people don't realize how much money law enforcement doesn't have. They don't realize how understaffed we are. They don't realize, the real totality of everything. I mean, if people really understood the depravity and the hatred and the evil that's actually in this world, basically what Doug said earlier, and what cops do just being out there every single night, that's why people aren't stealing things from your car. That's why people aren't trying to break into your house. I mean, the blanket of protection that law enforcement gives is just undeniable. And I wish people would understand that more and be more open-minded to hearing that and knowing that. But it's tough. It's really tough, Jesse. And to be quite honest with you, I don't know what we can do. All I know at this point is that it falls back on the leaders of your department. The top cop, the supervisors, making sure that their officers are doing okay, making sure that they do talk about it, making sure that they're available to talk about any issues that they're having, doing debriefs of, critical incidents, even if it's something simple, like you're on a traffic stop and someone, just is super unruly with you and saying hateful things to you that just really kind of affect you and get to you, talking about that. I mean, I think that's super important to at least get that out there. I'm super fortunate. I do I lift a lot, obviously, with the whole bodybuilding thing. So that helps out with a lot of my stresses. But, my fiance, I mean, she's incredible when it comes to understanding trauma and mental health and wellness and awareness, so that, when I have issues, she's the first person I talk to, and, sometimes she listens, sometimes she gives advice. It just depends. But I think that's what it really takes, is just officers being there for other officers. I've heard guys want to get out of law enforcement. It's like, why would you want to do this job anymore? And I don't blame them. I truly do not blame them. I mean, you're in a profession where, the pay is not great. The hours are pretty bad. You do some pretty difficult things. You're asked to do a million things, but you went to the academy to enforce laws and drive a car and do traffic stops, but you're doing all types of other things. I mean, it's insane the type of pressure that society puts on cops to do things. And I would just say we just need to be there for each other the best that we can. Hopefully, this is me with my fingers crossed, I guess. Hopefully we've got some people, some politicians, some lawmakers that are going to do the right thing. And if they are going to do some of these crazy things that they're talking about doing, they do them in the right way. If they defund us and then put money into other programs to take some of the load off of us, so our stress levels are lower, so that we're not having to make so many decisions all the time in the most critical incidents.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Brandon. It's a great point too. And, I think what's important is that we remember that the world is not as the media portrays it to be. And what I mean by that is there are still good things happening. So I appreciate you sharing what you shared about still having positive experiences. Again, this job has always been difficult. We've always been undertrained. We've never been fully equipped or adequately staffed or able to handle every situation that we get called to, because like Chief Brown says, and Jesse quotes often, is that, every societal failing becomes our responsibility that we have not been trained on. And the mental health is just one of those, but there's many of them. And so whatever the problems are, it's like, hey, get the police involved. And I talked about this in the YouTube video I just made, but people who are calling the police have an expectation that we're going to handle it the way they want it to be handled, and it doesn't always go that way. And so immediately there's this rub. And so again, I think there's a lot that needs to be done, but I appreciate you sharing that. Like, hey, there are places where things are actually staying quasi normal, and things are still moving forward. It's not all just everything that we turn on and see in the media, because again, there's so much focus on the negativity of what's happening. And so we have to remember that for everything that we're consuming, there is another side to it, and it's important that everyone understand that. But Jesse, why don't you start getting us wrapping?
Sure. Man, we could have this conversation all day, I think, especially when you're talking to like really smart people like yourselves. So I'm glad you're able to help us.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. There's a saying I used to tell my friends that were bodybuilders, right? Strong like ox, but that doesn't apply to you, Brandon. You're a beast, but you're smart too. Denise, if it's two parts, right? Because I really wanted this to be like, where do we go from here? Like, what do we do now? Right? We're in this state. We talked about all the issues. How do we make things better? But we also always close. This is the way we close our shows, is we ask the individuals that are with us if they want to leave one thought, or, something that's coming up for you, something you're feeling, you want the audience to know anything. Now's the time to do it. But I hope that you can kind of put in like hope or direction or something with your answer, if you could, please, Denise.
So where did things go from here? I think, at least I'm hoping again that this is a true tipping point in policing. I think, and I'm hoping that agencies, well, I guess we're seeing it too. We're seeing a number of agencies take greater ownership over accountability and transparency within their departments, making changes and taking it, upon themselves to make changes and to reach out to the community and to listen to the community. So I think we're seeing that already. I'm hopeful that it will continue. I think what we're also going to see, and I'm also thinking about this from a civilian oversight perspective too, what we're also going to see is a number of cities are going to start looking for civilian oversight of police agencies. But I also think it's equally as important for agencies to begin to look internally. So to create divisions within their departments to focus on the organizational systemic issues that might be happening. So auditing not only, I know right now many agencies audit at kind of like the supervisor level, but taking it to the next step, doing more organizational level or internal audits, looking at body-worn camera use, looking at use of force, and making those changes and taking it upon themselves rather than having an external oversight in place. But I think I'm hoping that that's where it evolves to, that police agencies will begin to change and implement change. And a couple of folks said this earlier, that all of that takes time. It does. Changing culture takes time. And again, I'm overall hopeful and inspired too that we're having these conversations, that many folks are having these conversations about the need for change.
Thank you so much. And I will say that there are agencies that are doing the things that you mentioned, right? And all those little things add up. Joe and I refer to them as well, science does too, is micro actions. So I know for officers, we get so frustrated with all this, like these little things that get added, right? Our rule book gets bigger and bigger, and the more tasks we have to do and we just see it at the line officer level. We see it as, man, like, what do they expect from us, right? It's getting ridiculous, but it really separates you from that other agency where the city's burning down, right? So I think that those micro actions within an organization matter. And most of the ones that are doing well are doing exactly the things that you talked about. So thanks for all the work that you've done, Denise. Thank you for being on the show. You're amazing, and I'll always be there picking your brain whenever I can. So thanks.
Thank you.
Brandon, take us home, bud.
Yeah, Denise, I really agree with what you said. The thing, if I could, I'm not sure what it's called. There's like a thing where like you put words into a machine and then all these words pop out. It's like a big cloud and you can pick words or something or ideas. I mean, I would take the three of you, and I would do that. I mean, the things that we've talked about, the things that we've said are so paramount and so important from so many different perspectives. The thing that I know, being very early in my career in law enforcement, I know that things are going to change, and I think that they need to change, and I think it's going to be good change. I think that the open-mindedness that we keep speaking about, I think that has to happen. And I also think that the way that you do the job, the policies, the procedures, the academy, maybe even prerequisites before you can get hired by a department, I think those are going to change dramatically. And I think that anyone that is currently in law enforcement that does not want to make those changes, I think they're going to be at a hard step, because I think there might be something that is just mandated. Is that right? Is that wrong? I think it's all about perspective and how you look at it. And I think it also matters for your agency, your size, and all those other things too. But for the majority, I think that that's what's going to happen. I truly tip my hat off to anyone that is 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. I think you can be 20, I think, to apply here in Iowa, that wants to be a cop. It absolutely is so respectful that they would want to get into this profession with everything going on, everything that they know is going to happen probably in the future, and everything that is currently happening, that they would want to do this job. I think another thing is that the overall mindset of what we do, like I know, like we've been talking about, we say a lot of things, we need to do these things, but when do we do them? And like Denise said, this is the tipping point. And I think I truly believe it. I truly believe this is right now in this time in 2020. This is what is going on. I think it's going to change things. Community-based policing has to be the absolute number one thing we do. And I know it's so cliche in our profession. We talk about it all the time. I know people say it in job interviews and all types of stuff because they know that's what administrators want to hear, but it actually has to happen. We have to be out there engaging with the community literally as much as we possibly can. And I know a ton of departments that do that. I know a ton of officers that do that. A lot of Iowa is that because it is such a small state, and we have such a good connection with the community that it's incredible. Coming from where I came from, it's absolutely incredible. Never thought I would see it with you guys down in San Antonio with your mental health crisis unit. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that is phenomenal. The events that you guys are able to stop from happening, is just incredible. And I know departments don't have the funding or the officers to put them in units like that or even take them off patrol. But if that could be a thing, I mean, that would just do wonders for our country, just in terms of certain people responding to certain things. And I think that would do wonders. But I really think that if I could leave anybody with anything, I would say we need to engage with the community as much as we can. And I think it's going to be hard. I think it's going to take a lot of time because a lot of people do not want to hear it. Some people just legitimately think that police as an institution is bad. That no matter if you have all the great intentions in the world, if you have the purest heart, what you do, you represent bad. And that's just what they think. And, that saddens me a lot, actually, because like I said, I've seen so much good in this job. I know you guys have too. I've seen pure good. People change their lives because of an interaction that they have with the police. And, it's hard to know that that's what people think. And I think that that's what's going to be our hardest part right now is moving forward. But I think the best way to move forward is continue to have conversation. Leaders, city officials, public officials, whatever, they need to have open, real, raw conversations about what is going on. And community relations, we have to be out there with the people. We just have to. And I think we'll gain more respect through doing that. And I think they'll understand us more. I think they'll get why we do things more. But I'm hopeful. I am hopeful. I was down there for about a week. I was like, man, this is rough. Like, I don't know if we can come back from this. Like, this is pretty bad. You know what I mean? But I am hopeful.
Hey, thanks, Brandon. Like I said, you're a genuine guy. You're a great cop. Everyone around you respects you. And you're always doing positive and great things. And I enjoy following you on social media. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And everything you said is spot on, right? I'm reminded of something as you were speaking, and that's that, I talked about vicarious effects. And what if we turn that around, right? What if those interactions that are going to influence and trickle out were positive interactions, right? What if that individual in that community goes and tells his 10 buddies that he had an awesome interaction, that he spoke to somebody and they listened, or they took the time out, or they just didn't jump across and do A, B, or C, or whatever, right? How is that going to affect change? And what I'm going to leave with is, this is how we move forward, I think, right? Because there's things that we're not going to be able to control. I'm not going to be able to control how a city council votes in another city or state. I want to be able to control how that does where I live, right? I don't know what procedures or policies, leadership will take, or I don't know how other people are going to perceive me even after this show, what people are going to say. I can't change any of those things. But what I can control is me. And I read something that Simon Sinek posted yesterday, and yeah, I got a man crush on Simon, right? And Joe knows this, so I quote him often. But he says, we can make demands of our leaders and have a desire to change systems, but we are only responsible for ourselves and our own actions. The change has to start within each of us. So while we worry about all these other things, I say that we still hold true to our beliefs. We have honest conversations, and we set the example for the next group. And if people are seeing you as an officer, who I respect all of you and love all of you, brothers and sisters, if people view you this way, move forward, right? Give them a reason to say otherwise. It's not until they know us that we have any hope of changing it. And that's all I have. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Joe?
I love it. You got to subscribe. So again, Denise and Brandon, thank you. I really appreciate it. All I'm going to finish with is, Brandon, I love what you were saying, and I really agree. I think that police academies need to be scrapped and rethought. I think we have to restructure them. I think more has to be done when we're talking about how we're training these people to do this job, because the warrior mindset mentality is not going to work. The public is standing against it, and so we have to be willing to evolve with the times around us. And so I think that there's a lot that can be done when it comes to creating a new training academy for police officers. Two more things. One is again, we have to be willing to validate experiences of people right now. I think that is the way we're going to move forward. People are angry. We must validate their emotional intensity, whatever they're feeling, validate it. Here's the reality. As white people, we have lost any and all ability to stand on any argument at all when the world watches a white man have his knee on the neck of a black man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds until he's dead. Period. You do not have an argument. There's nothing that we can say. Yes, every cop that I have talked to opposes that. Every police chief has come out and said it's terrible. For once, law enforcement is unified in standing against that incident. But you have to then just say, that's it. Like, you can't argue, well, yeah, but just stop. We lose the ability to argue. And then I was called to action this morning, listening to this talk. And this again, it's a pastor out of San Diego. And he says, what you can do as a white person, and I'm guilty of this, because he said, don't tell us that you don't see color, that you're colorblind when it comes to, because that invalidates us as black people. And I was like, got it. One of the things that I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong, and I've said that before. I've said, like, oh, I don't see color when I show up to help people. I genuinely just see people. I'm there to help them regardless of what they look like. But apparently that could be offensive to a black individual. And so I'm sorry for that. I want to say, yes, okay, I see you as a black person, and I'm willing to still listen to you the same, because that is equally as important. But what he asked is, he said, hey, if you're white, and you're in a position of power, you're in a position of authority, if you have a sphere of influence, put your face out there, put your name out there, and say, I denounce the violence that's happening in this country on the African-American community. And I also believe that a black life is just as important as a white life. That's what he asked us to do. And so I'm very, very happy and willing to do that, because again, I think that it's like, take action. Your words are one thing, but take action. I would say instead of choosing a side, educate yourself, right? Remember, it doesn't have to be you and me, it can be we. And then, like I always say, challenge your beliefs, right? Why do you feel the way you feel? If you're emotionally intense about something, ask yourself why. Do you know the historical context of that? Or are you just a bandwagon emotional feeler and your community is telling you to feel a certain way, and so you're doing it and you have no idea why? Challenge what it is you believe and then proceed. And finally, healing starts when listening begins. And that's my final takeaway. People will start healing when you start listening. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know we went and did basically 2 shows. We're at 90 minutes. Denise, thank you for taking time out of your Saturday. Brandon, thank you for taking time out of your Saturday. Thank you to your department for allowing you to do this. Jesse, always a pleasure. Love y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye.